Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Ulan Gaming and I'm doing our next civilization overview. This time we will be covering India, which is the first of these civilizations that you will see where I looked at the flag and went, no, I'm just going to get that from the wiki instead of making it myself. So we actually have a full flag here, which is a rarity here, as many of you guys know. Now let's get into India. So India is one of the Asian civs, and it is very unique. I would say it's less unique than the other two Asian civs, though, for reasons we will get into later. But for now, let's get into their unique mechanics. So their most obvious unique mechanic that is generally a turnoff for a lot of people trying to get into India is that the settlers cost wood instead of food. Now this is countered, of course, by the fact that India starts with all of their Age 1 and Age 2 wood upgrade cards already, wood upgrade market upgrades, already researched. So you don't actually have any wood gathering upgrades to get until Age 3. The other unique mechanic is the Consulate. Like all Asian civs, they have the Consulate, but I will say that India has, in my personal opinion, the weakest of the three consulates. You see, China has consulates that have the resource trickles, and they have they have the resource trickles, and then they have Russia, which can get them things like blockhouses, forts, and even a factory once you hit Age 4. And then for Japan, they have the Portugal, which they have Portugal, which gives them the water boats and also reduces their cost for age up and building cost in general, which really helps lean into their shrine boom. And while India technically also has the Portuguese allies, they don't make as good use of it because they don't house boom, and because their settlers cost wood, you're probably not going to be making a consulate in Age 1 like the other two civilizations are. Their best economy, their best economy-wise in terms of the consulate upgrades is the Ottomans. The Ottomans give them access to a 4-settler shipment through the consulate, which is very valuable. It also gives you access to the Great Bombards once you hit Age 4, but that's generally about it. India used to have what is called the GFA-FF, which is the Good Faith Agreements Fast Fortress, where you would get good faith agreements and diplomatic intrigue and research with the France consulate in order to get the crate shipments. But unfortunately, they changed the crate shipments associated with that consulate when they changed China in the most recent update, so that the coin shipment that you used to get for India to help you get your fast fortress is no longer usable in the second age, meaning you can't use it to fast fortress, and you're going to have to send your 600 to 700 coins. So that means that in this most recent patch, India is locked out of one of their strategies, and the people are going to have to get a little bit more creative with how they use India. I definitely think that this most recent patch was a huge nerf for India in that regard. So just because of all of these things, and the India by far has the worst economic upgrade capability of the three. They have the shipments that they can't use, that they don't make good use of. The crate shipments. They have the settlers, which are fantastic, and they could go to Portugal and get the boats, but that would be rather costly on their on their export. So that's the consulate for India. It is a unique mechanic, but it is easily the worst of the three. They have mansubdars. So we talked last time we talked about Japan, we talked about the shoguns and daimyos, which provide. The shoguns provide a 10% attack boost, and then the daimyos provide a 10% attack boost, and then the shogun, which you can get in Age 4, provides a 10% HP boost. Mansubdars are the India unique mechanic version of this. So mansubdars boost attack and hit points together, all in one unit. But the unit only applies its buff to one specific type of unit. So, for example, if you have they are retrainable, and they are very cheap and faster to retrain than the shoguns and than the daimyos, and the shogun cannot be retrained at all, which is very good. But for example, if you were to get a Mansabdar sepoy, which is like a musketeer, then all of your sepoys that are around that Mansabdar sepoy would get 10% HP and attack, and the troop of Gurkhas right next to your sepoy mass would get nothing. So if you would want, you would want to train one Mansabdar sepoy and then one Mansabdar Gurkha in order to get all of your units to have 10% attack and hit points across the board to get their auras. And that is how India's aura system works. Their last unique mechanic is that India cannot gather food from livestock. They don't gather anything from sheep or llamas or cows or anything like that. Instead, the livestock generate XP, and their livestock pens are called sacred shrines, where the cows can quote-unquote gather from to generate XP over time. This is a very valuable ability to have on livestock maps like Mongolia, where you absolutely must prioritize getting as much livestock as you can to get your little XP factories going. With that out of the way, let's get into their playstyle. So, the general playstyle for India is to either rush or semi-fast fortress. They are one of the few civs that have a good skirm goon combo in the Second Age. And because of their general high quality in their units across the board, they generally don't need to age quickly to 3 like a civ like Germany does, for example. So they're generally not in any rush. So they do rush, you know what I mean. So they'll either rush or semi-fast fortress you. They used to occasionally fast fortress, and they would use this to go into veterancy upgrades or elephants or any number of things, but I don't think that this is going to be particularly common now that the crate shipments have been nerfed specifically for India, making it so that they can't get their coin crates in the Second Age. I do think that is going to be a huge detriment and close off one of their strategy doors and have to get people to be more creative when they play as India. Now let's talk about their age-up system. They have wonders, just like all of the Asian civs. Now the wonders for India are very, very good. One of their wonders in particular, the Agra Fort, is very well known from even people who don't play India. The Agra Fort it's a fort, and because it's a wonder, that means you can get it in Age 2, and that is what 90% of India players do, is they will build an Agra Fort in Age 2 in the center of the map and take huge amounts of map control, or they will turtle and boom and put the Agra Fort in their base and make it so that you have to deal with a fort right in the Second Age. Now, damage-wise, the Agra Fort doesn't actually do that much. It's like a glorified outpost with a ton of HP, but what's more important about the Agra Fort is that it can train units and you can ship units to it, and it's in the Second Age, so it's very useful for rushes and a forward base, because you don't need to worry about having to make a barracks or a castle or anything like that. You have all of that just in one go. As for other wonders, there are 2 other wonders that I want to point out, and that would be the Karni Amada. Or there's actually 3 wonders. 3 other wonders. I want to talk about all of them except Tower of Victory, because Tower of Victory sucks. The Karni Amada is it's the most greedy economic of all of the wonders. It is a wonder. It ships a little bit of every resource when you age up with it, and it provides a aura boost around it for every single unit. So for every single one of your settlers that are gathering, I think it boosts by 10%. It's a 10% gather rate aura, so you want to put it in the back of your base, and then you put all of your farms and you put all of your rice paddies and stuff all around that Karni Amada, and your economy will be boosted by 10%. It is absolutely fantastic, and if you don't use this wonder as India, then you are wrong. Probably not for Age 2. You won't see it too often for Age 2. It will generally be the go-to if your opponent is using an Agra. It is not using an Agra, they will generally go with the Karni and Mata. But it is definitely a wonder you need to watch out for, because especially in the first stage, your opponent will probably be going Agra, but if you spot that they are going Karni and Mata instead, they are going for a very greedy boom, and that means that you need to push against them. As for their monks, they have the Brahmin, which are you get two monks as for your heroes as India, and you get the elephant riders. Now these elephants are absolute badasses. They both have area of effect. They both heal, and as opposed to having a critical strike like the other two Asian civs, they have a chance to just stun enemies for half a second. It's not particularly fantastic, but I mean, hey, it's a thing. You can take advantage of it. But even without the stun, the area of effect make the Brahmin absolute monsters when it comes to clearing treasures in the first stage that have large amounts of treasure guardians on them. The Brahmin are just absolute gods. Other civilizations will look at 6 coyotes or 5 black bears and kind of think to themselves, okay, I can kind of work on that over time. The Indian monks can just stun and then kill all 5 of them in one go right from the first stage at the very beginning. It's absolutely nuts. So the Brahmin, in terms of Age 1, are probably some of the best explorers at taking down treasure guardians. They are just absolutely godly. They're useful throughout the entire game too, because you can upgrade them to increase elephant movement speed or improve their healing so that they can heal their units faster. And I talk about their unique units. Like all of the Asian civs, pretty much every single unit available to India is unique to them. They have one piece of unique artillery called the Siege Elephant. The Siege Elephant is a culverin and a mortar smashed together with 750 HP and like 5.5 movement speed or something like that. Which you would think on paper sounds absolutely fantastic, but it has a couple problems associated with it. One is that it has far less range than other culverins or even normal cannons. I think it has like 28 range or something like that, which is good range, don't get me wrong, but it's not good compared to pretty much any other culverin type unit in the entire game. And it generally forces them to get close to your enemy army to take out cannons, which is a problem, because the second problem with the Siege Elephant is that they have both the artillery and the ranged cavalry tag, which means that they are countered by pretty much everything in the entire game. Enemy runs Huss into them, boom, they're dead. If enemy runs Dragoons, dead. Musketeers, dead. Skirmishers, very dead. Skirmishers are one of the greatest threats to Siege Elephants. Which is unfortunate because that is generally one of the go-to things to mass towards the late game. And because of this issue, India doesn't have the greatest culverin and mortar type units. Now to talk about their cavalry, their 2 heavy cavalry type units they have are the Sour and the Mahout. The Sour is available in Age 2. It rides a camel. It is one of the fastest heavy infantry types in the game. It's a Lancer type. It has 20 base damage, and it has a 2x multiplier against heavy infantry, and negative multipliers against heavy infantry to counter it out, so it does more damage against skirmishers, and normal damage, which is low, by the way, against musketeers and the like. But the problem with the Sour, because you'd think, oh, well, it's a Lancer type, it's really fast, it's really good, and yeah, it can be useful. But the problem with the Sour is that it's so frail. The Sour is one of the frailest units in the entire game. And don't even be surprised if they get one-shot by masses of skirmishers that they're supposed to counter. The Sours definitely have a problem of just being absolutely shredded by anything that touches them, even things that they are supposed to counter, as long as the enemy has them in good enough mass. They are relatively cheap, which is good. but their frailty generally kind of makes them outpaced towards the mid game. Late Fortress Age is when they really start to fall off. Because while they do have a decent amount of upgrades, the upgrades aren't good enough to carry them. As for the Mahout Lancer is the other heavy cavalry unit. It is locked till age 3. It is an elephant rider. It's just like the Sour. It has multipliers against infantry, but negative multipliers against heavy infantry to counter it out. But it also has splash and is super tanky, and all this is at the cost of slightly lower movement speed and very high population costs. The Mahout is an absolute monster. Whereas I mentioned before that skirmisher units will have trouble, will pick off Sours before the Sours close in. That is not the case for the Mahout. The Mahout is so tanky that you can put one Mahout, or one or two Mahouts on a huge group of skirmishers, and that group of skirmishers will die. And there's pretty much nothing they can do about it because they have to deal with the combination of multipliers and AoE. It's like if you smashed a Lancer and a Cuirassier together into one unit. It's absolutely just... If they get in contact with the skirmisher mass is dead. But they're not just useful against skirms. Because they're so tanky, you can stick them on the front line, and they will serve the same purpose as like a Lafiti Knight, where you can just throw them into armies of musketeers, and as long as you have a decent mass of Gurkha or something, or Sepoy behind them, you'll generally come out on top, even if it's at the cost of your Mahouts, because they just get in the way and soak up so many hits from the enemy. Mahouts are a unit that you want to use sparingly, just a couple at a time, because they do eat through your population, but having Mahouts is definitely a huge benefit to your team. But this is all, if you remember, at the cost of movement speed. So if we look at the unique units for India, we see that we have a low-range Culverin type that is countered by skirmishers, a very fast but very, very flimsy heavy cav Lancer type, and then a very heavy and high damaging but slow heavy cavalry type. And you kind of see that we have this problem of not having a particularly amazing anti-cavalry unit. We don't have a particularly well-balanced cavalry unit like the Hussar. All of their cavalry and all of their anti-artillery is very weighted towards one side. And this lack of balance makes India struggle versus artillery masses by quite a bit. So if you're fighting India in the late game and you don't know what to do, try making like 7 or 8 falconets and protecting them with some anti-cavalry, and you will do just fine. It is one of India's greatest weaknesses. Let's talk about the ranged cavalry right now. India has 2 of them. They have the Zambarak, available in Age 2. It's just like the Sour in that it is a fast, flimsy Dragoon. It is better than the Sour just because it is ranged, so it can get away with being flimsy a little bit more. Generally, though, I personally have never been the biggest fan of Sours because they can't... whereas normal Dragoons can fight Musketeers decently well, Zambaraks cannot. Zambaraks will get shredded by anything that isn't their direct counter. They do still have a place in this game, a very important place, one that is better than the Sour, I think, just because they are like one of the fastest Dragoons in the game in terms of base speed. And then the other is the Houda. The Houda is the last of the Elephant's units. The Houda is a Dragoon type. It's a dude chilling on top of a tower, chilling on top of an elephant with a gun. And the Houda is everything that the War Wagon wants to be. It is a tanky, very high damage, very high range anti-cavalry unit that I think is underutilized by India players. In all of these units, are absolutely fantastic, and you can absolutely use them under the right circumstances, but all the units that we talked about right now are somewhat circumstantial, despite their extremely high quality, and so you generally won't see strategies that are based around them. You might see strategies based around the Zambarak, but that's about it between them. The Houda is very valuable just in terms of like what it can provide. Its range is absolutely nuts for a Dragoon, and its damage is off the charts. It still maintains Dragoon multipliers against Cavalry, but it has, I think, 72 base attack. I mean, these things can two-shot Ulans. They are nuts. If you see a massive Houda and you have Cav, you need to be a little scared, because those Houda will fuck you up as long as they have any kind of infantry support to protect them. Now let's get into the red square units, generally the units that you will see people base their whole strategies around and really be the meat and potatoes of the India army, and that is their infantry. They have the Sepoy, which is a musketeer type unit. It is available from the Second Age. It is expensive, just like the Ashigaru is, and Sepoys are some of the best musketeers in the game just because of their raw-based stats. In terms of HP and damage, Sepoy are the best musketeers in the game. Now, in terms of whether or not they are actually the best, I would say that probably goes to the Ashigaru, because although it has 10 less hit points, it does have that extra movement speed. But the Sepoy is an absolute monster. The Sepoy generally struggles from lack of upgradability. There are very few India cards that upgrade the Sepoy. Your best bet for upgrading the Sepoy is actually just the Mansadar, which does do quite a bit for the Sepoy, just because their base stats are so high, which makes that 10% boost a lot more meaningful for them than it would be for other units. The Sepoy is useful throughout most of the game, probably not once you get to the very late game, like late H4 or Imperial. But the Sepoy is definitely one of the strongest musketeers in the game in terms of just raw stats, not counting movement speed. The Gurkha is the skirmisher for India, and it is red squared as one of their best units, but it isn't actually particularly outstanding. Its stats are not anything special compared to a normal skirmisher. Its upgrade cards, I think, are arguably worse. Because they have to send a card for their counter-infantry rifling, and they don't get any of the other stuff that counter-infantry they don't get advanced arsenal and stuff like that. So I definitely think that the Gurkha is worse than the normal skirmisher. But I definitely think it's still one of India's greatest assets, just because, just like the Dutch, it's available in the Second Age, and that is just a huge deal. Generally, if I'm trying to get some anti-musketeer units later in the game, I will make a combination of Gurkha and this other unit that I have red squared, the Urumi. The Urumus Swordsmen are absolute nightmares to deal with for your opponent on the battlefield. So these are skirmishers, but they attack in melee. Now, even so, they're made to counter heavy infantry, but they attack in melee. They're very, very tanky, and even though they attack in melee, they do ranged damage. So it gets around that nasty ranged melee resistance that musketeers have. But you might think, well, why would I want a melee skirmisher versus like a ranged skirmisher? And that's just because Urumi are so fucking tanky, it doesn't matter. They can tank falconet shots. They don't give a shit. They also have ridiculously high siege for a skirmisher. And if they get in contact with a mass of musketeers, that mass of musketeers will fucking die. There is no stopping it. The Urumi are nuts. The Urumi will shred pretty much any musketeer mass they touch, and they will perform decently well against most other units as well, even things that generally counter skirmishers like Hussar and Lancers will have slightly more trouble dealing with the Urumi. They're very sturdy. They are worse than skirmishers at dealing with Dragoons in particular, just because Dragoons can run away. But the Urumi is like a melee high siege skirmisher that is criminally underutilized. If you haven't tried using the Urumi, you should, because they are awesome. And the Rapujit is a bad pikeman. It's a bad Rodolero, and we're going to stop talking about it and skip over it. The primary unit composition that you will see from India is either mass Sepoy with support units, or mass Gurkha Zam / Gurkha Houda. They, like I mentioned before, they can go with a pretty decent Sturm Goon, and pretty much no matter what you're going to be doing, when you're fighting India, you're going to be fighting some weird unit compositions, because India can kind of just throw in whatever it wants as long as they have Sepoy and Gurkha to fill out the ranks. Now, things to watch out for when you are fighting an India player. Scout for a forward Agra Fort. An Age 2 fort is extremely powerful, as we all know, I'm sure. So you need to be on your toes and watch out to see if your opponent is building a forward Agra in the middle of the base, or in the middle of the map, or in their own base, or if they're going with a Karni Yamada, something like that. You need to make sure that you scout out your India player. You need to be very careful around shipment points. That's our second point when you're fighting India. So India have extremely powerful pops because of their ridiculously high value units. This is particularly true once they get to the Fortress and Industrial Age. Once they get to the Fortress Age, you need to be very, very careful that you're not standing by an Agra Fort when, say, a pop of Mahout Lancers or Tiger Claws pops out of their Agra Fort from a shipment, because those two Mahout Lancers could potentially destroy your entire military if it's built up of skirms, or if your army is split up around that Agra Fort to try to deal with some other military. So you need to be very careful around India's shipment points, because they're very, very dangerous. This is especially true once you get to the Industrial Age as well, as India can get the two Consulate Great Bombards from the Ottoman Consulate. And the last one is search for Mansabdars in combat. Now, Mansabdars are rather difficult to spot, because unlike Shoguns and Daimyos, they're not flashy and flamboyant. They do have their own models, but their quote-unquote models mostly consists of a slightly pimpier color palette. So the Sepoys have white turbans, whereas the Mansabdar Sepoy has a gold one, I think, is the difference between them. Or they have tan and the Mansabdar is white. I don't remember which one it is, but basically, if you see that the enemy's units have an aura, try searching for a unit in their mass that looks like he's a pimp, and that's going to be the that's going to be the Mansabdar, and you want to take him out so that you can get rid of the aura. And that's really it. Thank you guys very much for watching. I think this is one of the longest